There is indeed another way, and we're working on it, aren't we? We're working on it. I like to think maybe this series that we're doing kind of helps in a small way towards that other way where we learn to see this as an abundant universe where there's enough for everyone and there's no need to be defensive or to fight over things. So we're working on it. And believe it or not, it's week 6 in our 7-week fall series, one left to go, working with this book called Happiness, a guide to developing life's most important skill by Matthew Ricard. Back in week 1, if you can remember all that ways back, we talked a little bit about Matthew Ricard's background before he became a Buddhist monk, a Tibetan Buddhist monk. He got a PhD in molecular genetics from the prestigious Pasteur Institute in 1972. And from there, he went to work at a genetics lab that was run by a Nobel Prize-winning scientist. So he has some serious scientific credentials and experience, and he gave all that up to become a monk, which is probably a story all by itself. You might say, though, when he switched over to Buddhism and being a monk, he brought a unique perspective to Buddhism. The Dalai Lama is known for being an advocate of science and new discoveries, but Matthew Ricard was really on the cutting edge of those things. And when researchers in this country wanted to start studying how meditation affects the brain, Matthew Ricard became a major supporter of the research along with the Dalai Lama. He offered to serve as one of the test subjects, I guess you call him a guinea pig, in this early testing of the brain, and I think we got a picture of him here. There he is. He is in deep meditation. He's got something like, 100 electrodes on this cap that he was wearing, and he'd sit there for, hours, a long time, and they would measure his brain waves. So that's him in deep meditation being tested by scientists. And just for the heck of it, here's a picture of him with a red nose with the Blue Man Group, just to prove that he has a sense of humor, right? And he doesn't take himself too seriously. But he is a serious scientist, and this was a breakthrough research that was being conducted. And so far, the results are intriguing. It hasn't been going on for all that long. This research has been going on for maybe 10 or 15 years. What they found was that when these monks, and it wasn't just him involved, there were many other Buddhist monks, Tibetan Buddhist monks who were meditating, when they were doing what is known as a loving kindness or a compassion meditation, what they found was this dramatic increase in high-frequency brain activity that they call gamma waves. Not gamma rays, those will kill you, but gamma waves, this particular frequency of brain waves. In other words, what they discovered is that the effects of meditation can be measured. It shows up. And then they would measure the activity of the brain activity of monks in a resting or non-meditating state. And they found that there was a much higher rate of activity in areas of the brain that usually light up when people are reporting that they're undergoing positive emotional states. Joy, enthusiasm, love, whatever it is. So they concluded from this that positive emotional states and even happiness is a skill that can be learned, because these monks had conditioned themselves to show that brain activity when they were in a resting state. And that was an important discovery, the idea that happiness, that positive emotions are skills that can be learned. The brain can be trained to make a shift from negative to positive. Another thing they found is that experienced meditators were better at accurately evaluating people's facial expressions for what emotion was being conveyed in those facial expressions. People can be trained to do that, but the monks who were meditating, who had this meditation under their belt, were much better at it than the average person, and were even better at it than people who had been trained to do that kind of thing. Another interesting finding is that these same subjects, these meditating monks, reacted differently from the rest of us to sudden, loud noises that would occur when they're meditating. They would have them meditate, and they would let them know ahead of time that, all of a sudden there's going to be a big bang or something coming out of a speaker at some point in your meditation. I dare say that most of us would probably jump out of our seats when that happened. In fact, those of you who have meditated for any length of time, you remember when you first started meditating, if you happen to use a little timer. A lot of people use an oven timer to time their meditation session, and it goes off with a beep. And the first few times that would happen, you'd jump, startle, and as time would go on, that would diminish to the point where that would no longer happen. So this is another important finding. There's something going on in the brain that meditation conditions you to. The monks in this study, they not only continued to sit perfectly still when the thing went bang, but their brain waves barely shifted when the noise came on. And I know what a lot of you are probably thinking, because it's probably the same thing that I was thinking when I first heard about all of this. I was thinking, well, that's great if you're a Tibetan Buddhist monk who does nothing all day long but meditate. I mean, these guys have 10,000, 20,000 hours of lifetime meditation under their belts. What good is that for the rest of us who have lives, right? Who have jobs, who have families, and so on? What are we supposed to do with that? So they decided to look into that question too. Here's what they found. They went to work with employees of a biotech company in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where a lot of this major research went on at the University of Wisconsin. They took these employees and they taught them meditation for 3 months. And they found that these subjects were starting to show the same brain activity shifts from negative indicators to the positive ones, similar to what the monks had demonstrated. And then there was another piece of the study. This was interesting. At the beginning of this 3-month training session, the participants received a flu vaccine. All right? By the end of the 3 months, they decided to measure what the results were with regard to flu symptoms. And they found that the vaccine was 20% more effective for participants versus the non-participant control group. Now, we have to be careful not to read too much into this yet. Please don't go paying a lot of money to someone who claims that they can teach you how to meditate the flu and depression away. And I'm not exaggerating. There are people who will take a preliminary study like this, they'll put it out there, and they'll try to get rich by misrepresenting it. These are preliminary findings. The research is going forward, but the results are intriguing enough to want us to continue to look into this. And there's been a lot of progress. Our book was published back in 2005, and they've been doing a lot of work since then. You might be interested to know that at UC Davis, they're pioneering some of this work. They've been leading the way. They established something called the Center for Mind and Brain back in 2002. And one of their projects at the Center for Mind and Brain is this one here called the Shamatha Project. The Shamatha Project at the Center for Mind and Brain at UC Davis. And they call this one of the most comprehensive long-term studies of meditation that's ever been undertaken. And these are some of the most recent conclusions. Here's what they find. They say that initial results show that intensive contemplative training sharpens and sustains attention, enhances well-being, leads to less judgmental, more empathetic emotional responding to the suffering of others. Additionally, the training was linked with pro-social emotional behavior and important physiological markers of health. So again, positive findings that are intriguing enough to continue this work going forward. In other words, keep on meditating. There's no downside. And the research is adding up and shows that meditation is an important and very effective and helpful practice for developing the skill of happiness. But meditation isn't the only thing that's being associated with that kind of human thriving, which is really the core definition of happiness. Human thriving, human flourishing. So now we're going to get really up to date. Because just this last September, I came across an article in a blog that I follow. The blog is called Neurologica, and it's published by Dr. Stephen Novella, who's an academic neurologist at Yale University School of Medicine. The article was called, get this, How People Thrive. And it started with this observation. He said, there is a science to happiness and to what we might call thriving, sometimes called flourishing, not just surviving, but being happy and fulfilled. See, this language is starting to filter into science and academics to an even greater extent. And the reason he wrote this blog article was because there was a study that had just been released on September 7th of this year. It was released in a European psychology journal where they identified the factors that contribute to thriving, or as we like to call it, happiness. And here's the short list. Here's the short list of the factors. A person is more likely to identify as happy or flourishing if they are optimistic, spiritual or religious, someone who enjoys learning, flexible, and socially competent. There's more than that, but this is just a good short list to use. And notice the second one up there. It doesn't say spiritual but not religious. It says spiritual or religious. Interesting. And the reason very simply is because one of the key environmental factors for people who report that they're happy or thriving is having a sense of purpose, which healthy religion can provide, and also some form of supportive community or social connectedness, whether it's family or work or the kind of environment that healthy religion can provide, a church or a spiritual community. So those are the factors that people have when they identify as being happy. Here's a short list of the environmental factors that contribute to thriving and happiness. A person is more likely to identify as happy or flourishing if they have opportunity, employer, family, other support, challenges and difficulties that are at a manageable level, and a calm environment. There is a lot we can take home from this. And I've given you both of the lists that we just had up there. It's in the handout in your bulletin to use as a checklist. Take it, or better than a checklist, rate each one of those on a scale of, 0 to 10 to give you an idea of what you might want to work on if you want to be happier and more fulfilled. Just a good checklist, a good rating. One of the things that Dr. Novella stresses in this article is to be a lifelong learner. He spent quite a bit of time in the article talking about that. Try to master something. Get a hobby that provides a skill to hone. Learn the ukulele. I saw there's a place in Rockland called the Acoustic Den, where it's a little restaurant where they have acoustic performances, and I saw a picture on there where they have this ukulele jam. I don't know if it's once a month or whatever, but all these people sitting there strumming their ukuleles, they look like they were having a great time. So yeah, learn the ukulele, or learn how to make artworks with liquid wax, or create handcrafted lagers and ales, or bake artisan bread. Anything that you enjoy doing, and being able to drink it or eat it at the end is a major bonus. But whatever you love, something that you can master, so important. Dr. Novella also says this. This is an interesting observation. He says, further, invest time, effort, and resources in building your personal community. Make and maintain meaningful connections. Join an existing community that shares your values and interests. So, does anyone have any idea where you could possibly find something like that all in one place? Just he's basically summarizing our mission statement, right? And there's a very good reason why we put that up front of the service every single week, because it has all of the elements that he's talking about that came from that big European study on happiness. Here, look at this. And I've highlighted the stuff that's in there. A welcoming spiritual community advancing a positive message that teaches people of all ages and faiths how to thrive in a changing world. So, we cover the spiritual aspect. We cover the community aspect. We cover the part about being optimistic or positive. We cover the idea of learning and teaching. We cover the practice of thriving and the art of dealing with a rapidly changing world, which encourages us to be flexible and resourceful. There you go. There you go. I knew we were onto something back in 2008 when we came up with that. And the other thing he points out in the article, some of the things that are conspicuous by their absence on these two lists, is you don't see money or material possessions among the key attributes. But believe it or not, they are there. Money and a certain amount of stuff are necessary for happiness, but they are not by themselves sufficient. That's the thing to remember. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient. Here's what I mean by that. All we have to do is look at this next image. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Look at the bottom two layers there. Those are the basic needs. Those are the kind of things that money and possessions can provide to a certain extent. We have to have our survival and security needs satisfied, but those are not the places where we thrive or flourish or find happiness, for that matter. To get those things, we need to be moving up into that third layer, belongingness and love needs, and go up even higher than that. Those are all the things that are about purpose and mastering a skill and learning and so on and so forth. Those are the things that we need in addition to the basic survival needs. And those are the kind of things that additional money and possessions don't have a major effect on producing. So I think it's probably safe to say that for everyone in this room, we're in pretty good shape when it comes to survival and security needs, which means we really don't have to surround ourselves with a lot more stuff and money and things like that. We need to make sure that we're surrounding ourselves with opportunity and purpose, which is what Dr. Novella recommends in the article. And it's equally important to remember that not everyone in the larger community around us is in the same position. Those two bottom layers may not have been met for a lot of people around us, which is why we support organizations like the Interfaith Food Closet, the Food Basket Program, because generosity and happiness go hand in hand. You may have noticed when you came in today, the red barrel is back by the front door, which gives us another opportunity to help a few more people meet those survival and security needs so that they can finally go beyond that into the layers of thriving, flourishing, and happiness. One last point for today from our book on happiness. This is something that I found really interesting. Matthew Ricard talks about the little Buddhist country of Bhutan, which is in the region where he lives. Back in the 1980s, the country of Bhutan instituted a government policy of measuring not just their gross domestic product. We hear about gross domestic product all the time here in the United States. They also decided to measure, the gross domestic product is GDP, abbreviated GDP. In Bhutan, they decided to start measuring their GNH, which stands for gross national happiness. Official government policy, gross national happiness. In our country, I don't think we have the vocabulary to even talk about such a thing, much less make a policy decision on that basis or try to measure it for that purpose, which is surprising because let's think about our Declaration of Independence once again, right? Isn't that one of, and they call these rights unalienable rights in our Declaration of Independence are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And then the Declaration of Independence goes on to say that governments are instituted to secure these rights. Maybe we have something to learn from the little country of Bhutan when it comes to really honoring one of our cherished rights. So next week, we're going to wrap things up. So be sure to come back, at least for that, but we have the Thanksgiving potluck after the service, so that gives you something else to come back for. We'll see you then.